Hello all, welcome to Up The Poshcast, the Poshcast made by the fans for the fans. Grab yourself a drink, put your feet up and listen in. And by the way, there could be some strong language.
Hello all and welcome to another episode of Up The Poshcast. We are recording after yet another Peterborough United away defeat, this time to Stockport. Tonight we've got five of us here. We've got Charlie, we've got Lodz, we've got Max, and we've got someone I don't recognise. Is that a man who went into disappearing mode after the Birmingham City incident? I think it is. It's Harry Anders. He's back from the dead. It's unbelievable scenes here. And we've got myself, John. We're going to get straight into it. We're going to dissect another defeat. Like I said, Charlie, you were at the game last night. You travelled up to Stockport. What did you make of it?
It wasn't actually as bad as it's being made out to be on social media, I don't think. It was actually quite a close game. Lost in both boxes yet again. Feels like that's just the theme of this season. We let in such a sloppy goal really early in the game, and to be fair, for the first 25 minutes we were absolutely abysmal. Actually, up until our goal we were terrible. They were all over us. We couldn't string passes together, but then we equalised sort of against the run of play, and we grew into it. And then I thought we actually hammered them for the first 15 minutes of the second half. I thought we were absolutely all over them up until that Randall chance where he could have put it into the open goal potentially with his second touch. We ended up missing that one. And then there was another one where we had a really good attack and Hayes cut in. And then just the game sort of got away from us, and attacking that big end with 5,000 fans in, our defenders just couldn't hack it. Another really sloppy goal to concede. And we ended up losing a game that I reckon most of the teams in the league with the chances that they had and with a pretty ineffectual Stockport team they were up against would have come away with something last night. But yet again, we find ourselves managing to lose.
Yeah, and I think sort of the first thing that we should come in on is talk about the defence again, because it seems to be a recurring theme over these episodes, and I'm still sick to the back teeth of it. We don't lose that game last night if we don't switch off for 2 moments, and that's the end of the story, really. The second goal was ridiculously sloppy. Mills lost his man. Otto just looked like a mannequin, just stood still, completely froze. And they again needed to tap in at the back post, and I don't think that's me being harsh. I think that's being completely fair. It was ridiculous. I don't know why Kean Hayes is marking Louis Barry. Where was Katongo? Louis Barry made quick work of Kean Hayes. And the ball in the box didn't even come in with that much pace, I don't think. It seemed to sort of trickle through the back line, and we all completely froze. And the first goal was just as bad. It's a free kick. It's a low free kick. Everybody's fallen for it and jumped in the air, and the ball's just gone straight to the back of the net. And Bilo was blaming Mills. I think that was pretty harsh. I think Bilo definitely could have done better. I think the wall could have done better. But I've seen on Twitter, it's like watching cardboard cutouts just standing in the 6-yard box at sometimes, and we just need a character who's going to lump it away. That's all we needed last night. And the defence again has let us down, and I think Darren Ferguson will be really disappointed, because I actually agree with Charlie. I don't think the performance was that bad. I thought we were the better side again, which has been the story of a lot of the defeats this season. I thought we were, and unfortunately, again, it's the defence that's let us down, and 2 moments in the game that has cost us 3 points. And Darren Ferguson summed up amazingly. We keep finding ways to lose games, and that's a horrible habit to be in. And hopefully, we can sort of fix whatever the problem is in January with some players, if that's what we think the problem is. But I really think everybody needs to have a look at themselves and think, well, how are we going to solve this problem? Because at this level, considering where the aspiration was this season, that Darren Ferguson and co had painted at the start, I cannot believe that we've got mannequins defending in the box. It's silly.
I think I might have watched a different game to you two. I thought we were terrible compared to Stockport yesterday. I think we were really, really sloppy in possession. I don't think we could string many moves together. And Darren Ferguson's always said that our attack's so good that we don't make plans to defend against certain teams in certain situations, but it felt like we were defending the wings too much, and Hayes and Mothersill were just sitting far too deep, and I think that was causing the issues of us in possession and our counter attacks. I think we really, really struggled to get the ball up the pitch. normally we're creating loads and loads of chances, scoring loads and loads of goals. And I don't remember many chances at all. And it felt a bit like the Bolton game, Bolton away, where Bilo obviously had a really good game, and I think we defended really well that game. I think Stockport probably just lacks that cutting edge in our box. Obviously, we made a couple of really stupid errors and conceded. But I actually think that the scoreline probably should have been a lot harsher on us. I think Stockport could have easily have scored more and more goals if they had their finishing boots on.
Yeah, and honestly, even if we had conceded 2 or 3, I mean, sometimes we look at these games and go, the defense isn't good enough, but the attack is, and we're getting 3 or 4 good chances in a game that usually would be goals. I mean, 4-3 earlier or last week, where the attack got us over the line. Essentially, I do not think we were that good last night either. We were for a spell maybe, and there was some decent tenacity in the midfield in the beginning of the second half, but I think one particular performance that frustrated me the most was Mother Seal. It just, the inability to trap the ball against mild pressure from League One players is not becoming of somebody who's going to go on and win the Ballon d'Or. I mean, I just want to see more consistency. He had a couple of good runs, a couple of good quick passes into the middle, but as an effective attacking unit, whether it's not necessarily just him, but everyone, you've got to be able to trap the ball a bit better in the conditions that were in last night, where they're getting pressed fairly hard. Randall as well, I said one of the last times I was on, which I'm sure was ages ago, go back 20 episodes, no doubt, that he doesn't often put in 90-minute performances. And again, it wasn't a 90-minute performance with him. I was really happy with how he came out in the second half, tackling loads as well, actually getting stuck in. It was great to see. Had a few good passes. Obviously scored, was in the right spot. Obviously hit Keane Hayes, did all the hard work there. But he wasn't there for the whole 90 minutes, right? And he did nothing essentially after the formation change to the 5 at the back. So yeah, I think that the offensive side of the game wasn't there last night any more than the defense was, really.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I will agree with. I think the midfield of probably our best period of the game was the midfield with Donne, O'Brien Brady, and Ryan de Havilland. They controlled it a lot better than we did when Hector was on. But yeah, I agree that the attack actually wasn't very effective at all. I think, Malik Mothersill. It's actually funny because of doing the podcast. Whenever he does something bad, people that watch the podcast or listen or you guys, you always turn to me and look to me as if I'm gonna do some sort of knee slide in the terrace. Like I'm gonna be happy that he makes mistakes. I'm not. But last night was terrible. I mean, really bad. I actually gave him a 5 in the player ratings, which I think after having slept on it was probably too generous. I think the amount of misplaced passes, especially in the first half, where he was just giving them the ball in their half, in our half was abysmal. I don't think he did anything attacking, and it's now two different players. Keane Hayes, now it was Poku earlier in the season, that have had to carry the wide areas. And Malik Mothersill was completely ineffectual last night. It didn't look like anything was ever going to come from his side of the pitch. And it's just a shame that Ado's just as bad, unfortunately. But I do think that is a bit of a harsh reflection on the performance as a whole from Harry and Lodz. I don't think Stockport dominated us. I think the easiest way to see is I went onto Stockport Twitter, as I always do. I go onto the hashtag of other teams when we play against them, and they looked like they were feeling relatively lucky to have won the game. They feel that it was very much a job done against an opposition that could have been tricky, and that they weren't at their best at all. And I think that we had more of the ball percentage wise. We had higher possession. We had a lot of dangerous chances, and other than the first sort of 25 minutes, they didn't really create a lot for the rest of the game. So yeah, I think I actually don't think it was a bad performance, and I think it's just another very frustrating result.
I think when we talk about players, I usually defend a lot of them. and I'm going to do the same again today. And we'll start with Malik, because I think Malik, although his performance yesterday was very bad, and I'm going to completely stand here and say that it is, I think he played with, like, at multiple times through the game. I think he played with Adebisi, he played with Mills. So he's played with 2 new left backs that he hasn't played with, or full backs that he hasn't played with this season. So I think that off the get go had made it a struggle for him to sort of get into that rhythm and get into that sort of process that we can see. And we all know Malik's ability. And we all know that Malik can control and dominate games, which is something that we have seen on multiple occasions. Last night it wasn't there, and he was definitely probably the worst winger on the pitch for our team. When you look at Kean Hayes, and when you look at Ricky J. Jones, who actually I don't think had a bad game either. But I think the problem is that Malik, to make the claims that he makes, needs to put a stamp and needs to be performing consistently every week. It's a very similar story to Randall, who I'll come back to in a moment. But Malik yesterday was really frustrating me with these passes into midfield that he does. He doesn't look, he doesn't scan, he just fires it in and expects Randall to be there. And there was a Stockport player there 9 times out of 10 last night, but he kept doing it. And the Stockport players read it every single time. They could just recycle possession from it. And that isn't a problem with the left back. Not having the chemistry there and being able to play off each other. And Malik moves extremely dynamically. So having that chemistry with the left back really helps, because obviously he can make Mills can play the balls in that the Malik wants. And that chemistry wasn't there. And that was a struggle. When you've got the ball, the passes into midfield was silly. And he didn't want to get at his man. And when he did get at his man, he lost the ball. And that's the inconsistencies that I'm talking about with Malik. So I think probably, as Charlie said, Charlie said a 5 was generous. So, I disagree with that. I think, given the circumstances, a 5 sounds about right. 5.5 sounds about right. But and when you look at Randall, who's a player I defend every week, it seems. But Harry said that he didn't do a lot when we changed system. I don't think that was his fault. And I think this is the problem that we've got at the moment with Fergie making the substitutions, because I've made this complaint a lot, and I'll make it again. The substitutes didn't make sense last night. They just didn't. I don't think they made any sort of sense. That Ricky was starting to grow into the game, he was taken off. And then we changed the system, went to the back 3. Then we played Chris Clark. I wasn't really sure where Chris Clark was playing. The general grievance was, I don't think the players actually knew where they were playing. And at the end of the day, how can you formulate attack and build attacking patterns when you don't know where you're playing? So I think that was a real negative from the substitutions.
I mean, I kind of agree with the analysis on Mothersill. I don't think he was very good last night, but I don't think anyone was very good last night. I actually found it a really sad watch, because I expected us to lose that game. I came on here and I said, I think we're going to lose. And we did lose. And I thought we looked worse than them in pretty much every department of the pitch. This was a side that was playing League 2 football last season. They're a decent team. They're a decent League 1 team now. But you go back 11 months, we were completely outplaying Derby County, or a championship side now, on their own patch. And last night, I thought we never really looked like winning. Did we have 2 shots on target? Don't think so. I think we had 1 shot on target all match. I don't think we can say we deserved anything from the game. I thought it was an insipid performance from pretty much every department. And actually, I think their defence looked better than ours. I thought their midfield looked better than ours. And I thought their front 4 looked better than ours, with Louis Barry causing us all sorts of problems. And I find that really, really sad. So we can single out individual players, and we will go and talk about individual players. But as a collective is what I found the most disheartening thing about that. The fact that we've now sunk behind a team that was playing in the league below us last season whilst we were a playoff team. And I think I've looked at a stat now, and Posh have not beat a team ranked higher than 12th in the league this season. The highest ranked team we've beaten so far this season is Blackpool. They're in 12th position after today's results. That is a damning indictment on the quality of this squad. We are, okay, the formula of, getting the attackers going against the bottom teams, the cannon fodder works. We can pretty much just out-skill them with our attacking flair. As soon as we come up against a decent outlet that's well-drilled, that can get near the top of the league, we look miles worse than them as a team. And I think now is the time where you start saying, okay, management staff, should this be happening? Player quality, have we got as much player quality as we thought? And I think the answer to those, Fergie's admitted himself he's not getting the most out of this team. And I think he needs to start thinking about what he can do to change it, because this isn't working. And I think the players themselves, clearly we have bought the wrong players, because we look miles, and I mean miles, off being a top 6 side this season. And that was what last night really showed to me. I know we've kind of had that theory in our head, but there was always that hope. Dara came on his podcast and said the second half of the season is going to be special, and he still believes. And maybe you have to put that message out in public, but please stop now, because it's not going to happen. This team is miles away from the quality that it needs to get to the top 6.
I think you're being quite harsh there, John. I mean, I think this team has got a lot of redeeming qualities. I think, you spoke about dominating Derby on their own patch. Well, we still have the 2 midfielders that were completely integral to that happening, in Archie Collins and Hector Cipriano, as well as Joel Randall, who, if you don't remember, some of the Derby fans, if we're using that as the example, said it was the best player they've seen at Pride Park all season last season, and is a very good League One player. Then you've got Ricky J. Jones, who is having the best season of his career up front. And while he was absolutely manhandled out of the game last night, he is a very good striker for League One level. Then you've got Malik Mothersill, who, can sometimes be dodgy. Let's not get this wrong, but he can also sometimes be electric. And you've still got Kwame Poku to come back in February. And yes, the back 4 is dodgy, but you've still got Jado Katongo from last season, so that's a bit of continuity. And you've still got the 2 goalkeepers that we used last season. And we're getting some defensive help in January in the transfer market. And Adebisi came back last night, who is probably the best left back in League 2 last season. So let's be a bit more chill, and let's not write off this team completely. I think, we are going to beat teams in the top half this season. That is going to happen. And while, listen, a playoff push might not be the most realistic thing purely from a mathematical perspective, it wouldn't surprise me if this team was able to string together playoff form from now till the end of the season. It's just a shame that they've left themselves with so much to do because of losing games like they shouldn't have lost, like Cobblers, like Burton, and a bit like last night as well. I just think we're being harsh on this team, saying that they're that I've heard the words worst team under Fergie thrown around in group chats I'm in. That was last night. And I don't agree with them that this team hasn't got any potential, because I actually do think if we can sort out a couple of big issues, because it's the same issue, just sloppy defending, we could be actually a really good side. And there's always a latecomer to the party. And I do agree with Dara on this. There's always a team that goes and puts together a run. And if people are genuinely saying that there's a chance that we could get relegated this season, we are just as close to getting to the playoffs as we are relegation points wise. I think maybe a tiny bit closer to the bottom. If there's a chance we can get relegated, then there's also a chance we can get the playoffs. And I think that giving up on the season completely when we've still got 2 home games left this year and a massive month in January is a bit harsh.
So I'm going to dissect all of that. It was quite a long ramble, Charlie. Firstly, I don't see how it's harsh. We're 12 points behind the top 5 after 20 games now. 12 points behind the top 5. We've got 1 space to chase. So if you're looking up the table, it's going to be very, very difficult given how far behind we are. We're 5 points off the drop, and Crawley have a game in hand. I don't think we're going down, but what you said was factually incorrect. So let's get that straight. We do have some good players. I agree with you, Charlie. Archie Collins, great player. Hector Cipriano, very good player. Can't stay fit this season. We do have some redeeming qualities, and we do have some decent players in this team. But that's why we're a mid-table team, because of the glaring issues. I don't see what you've seen with your eyes that tells you this squad can go and sustain playoff form. Every team in the playoffs that we've come up against, whether that be Birmingham, Huddersfield, Wrexham, Stockport, Bolton, who are outside the playoffs, have pretty much comprehensively outplayed us. And you can say this team's let itself down by games they shouldn't have lost. We were shit against Burton. We should have beaten them on paper. We were terrible. We weren't unfortunate to lose that game in the same way we were against Northampton. So I don't really see what your point is there. That's the inconsistency of this team. It's just not good enough to achieve our aims this season. And that's not me saying it's a terrible team, but it looks like a mid-table team. That's not a harsh statement. That's what it looks like on the pitch. You can talk with your heart, but if you lose your eyes, there's no metric that you can quantify that suggests this team is going to make the top 6, apart from blind optimism.
I think it's very easy to write a negative narrative at the moment. And I think that's sort of like a fair analysis, is that this season hasn't been where we wanted it to be. We have a whole second half and 2 home games left. It's the main thing. 7 points off 6th place. You know, we saw last season the likes of Grant McCann and Doncaster, how things can change during the second half of the season. We are 2 players away from competing, especially at the back. A right back and a centre back away, a good centre back and a good right back away from being back competing. So I'm not necessarily going to take that we're not a playoff contending side. At the moment, we're definitely not, and I completely agree with you on that front. I don't think we're going to make the playoffs if the team stays how it is now. We are 2 good signings away from it, and a rocket up the arse from Darren Ferguson to his players. But we've seen what this team can do, and Charlie's completely right in the aspect that we still have the main core from last season. And yes, there might not be a click at the moment, but again, changing the whole back line is such a challenge. And to be where we are, I'm not overly surprised at, to be honest, with the standard of our back 4. But again, I'm not going to sit here and say that we're not going to get there. And I think saying categorically that we're not going to say that, and people can't say that, John, was harsh. And I think that's probably what Charlie was getting at more, was saying that it's categorically impossible when it's not is harsh. We need to wait how January pans out, and then we can have this discussion again. But I feel actually there's probably elements of that is a negative narrative that you're writing because of the positions that we're in at the moment.
Sorry, I think we're more than 2 positions away from. When you say competing match, you mean top 6 or at least around top 6?
Yeah. 100%.
I think it's a lot more than that. Like, fine, Cipriani's a great player, doesn't want to be here. Well, if he doesn't go in Jan, he will peter out until he goes in the summer. Whether we keep all of our front lot with Lundgren coming in, I don't know if we'll keep all of them. And fine, Katongo's decent at right back, but I think he's a bit like Randall in the sense that he needs a lot of very high quality players around him to get the best out of him. He's not the one that leads a good performance. Like, in my opinion, Ronnie, Efron, and to be fair, Archie. I'd say the 3 of them, and obviously we've still got Archie, what are the leading players, or were the leading players last year, who would drive a good performance. And then we have other good players around that. At least they're good when everyone else is purring. And I think Katongo is one of those. I think Randall's one of those. I think Ricky probably falls into that, but Ricky does have that kind of X factor of being able to create things out of nowhere. We saw a little bit of that last night when he charged down their keeper to make that chance. But I think we need at least 2 just to start. Maybe 2 true leaders come in, but beyond that, I'd say another 3 or 4 before we're back at competing level. And part of that is because of regression. I think Cipriani's clearly regressed from where he was last season, and no doubt when he goes and moves to a championship club, he'll be exactly where he was. And I think there's other players that fall into that category as well. Yeah, look, I've got a lot of hope for Hayes, who could well easily fill the boots of what Poku was doing or Mason Clark was doing. And there's still that hope that Ricky, if he can learn to finish and trap a ball, then, or at least do that consistently, then he could be a 30-goal a season striker. I genuinely think that. But sorry, 2 players. I think it's way more than that, personally.
I think that's probably a little bit silly, if I'm being honest. When you look at the problems that we've been having at the moment, it's not throughout the team and the front quarter. The front 2/3 actually. You look at the CDM positions, we've been really unlucky with injuries there, and Cipriano hasn't been able to stay fit. I don't think that's regression. You're saying that he's regressing in skill. I think if you think that, that's ludicrous. Cipriano definitely has not regressed in skill. He had a slow start to the season, don't get me wrong, but when he came back from injury, he looked he looked good. He did look good. And he's had a setback, which I think is unfortunate. But when Collins and Cipriano play together, we probably have one of the best midfield duos in this league, and I'm happy to die on that hill and defend that case. I think last season we saw that, and we've been unlucky with an injury to Poku, who is our best player. I don't think we would have lost a lot of the games if we had Poku and Poku's quality. I definitely don't think we would have lost to Cobblers. I definitely don't think we would have lost last night. I think there was plenty of opportunities that Poku would have been able to create, and losing that is a terrible cog out the system. But to say that we are, look, you can say what you want about players that we need to bring in. You know, where is the problems that lie at the moment? What is hindering us from pushing up the table? It's 2 positions. So when you look at it like that, we are a centre back, an experienced centre back that can help Nevitt, because I think Nevitt's our option, judging by what Ferguson said last night in his interview. I said an experienced centre back that can help Nevitt, and a right back. And Hayes looks really, really good. If Randall can pull the trigger a bit more, and to say Randall needs high performance players around him. Last season, he was. I just don't think that's really, really true. I mean, he is a good player himself. The problem is his inconsistency. I don't think it's the players around him. Randall can build games on his own. It's just the inconsistency, and that's the narrative of the team at the moment. Is it's inconsistent. To say that we're more than 2 positions off, at least competing to that level, I think is silly, and I think Darren Ferguson will really hammer that down when January window opens.
I kind of agree with what Max is saying. I do think we'd be such a better side with definitely some sort of experienced centre back. I know we spoke about it a bit last week. Not necessarily like a 30-year-old Mark Beavers type, but just someone that's played a bit of football in the division. Right back, I don't mind Katongo there, but when you think about the relationship that Poku had with Kyoto at the beginning of last season, it'd be nice to sort of recreate that. But then at the same time, we're talking about how many points we are off playoffs. It's not how many points we are, it's how many teams are in between us and playoffs. We have to outperform all of those teams between now and the end of the season. It's not how many points can we win. We could win every game, and so could they. We're 16th in the league. I think that's the issue here. I would rather just call this season a day. We're not going to get relegated. We're a much better side than that. I think we should just develop the players now. I said last week that I like all of the defenders. I like their potential. They're not good enough right now, but with an extra year under their belt, they could be next season. I think we should just trust the process. I hate using that term, but we've signed them for a reason. We've signed them because they've got high potential. If we bin them off now, it could have a worse effect than if we persist with them and then give them another go next season and be a bit more competitive.
So I'd love to agree with you on that we're 2 positions short. And look, there are 2 glaring positions that we need to upgrade, right? It's a centre-back and a right-back. But I think you're being very generous on the fact that Bilakapic and Steer, would I say either of them as top 6 goalkeeper in League One? I'm not convinced, to be honest. Steer has the lowest save percentage in the league. Bilakapic has potential, but he's dropped a few clangers. I don't think he's an elite goalkeeper in League One for certain. I think you're putting a lot of blind faith in Rio Adebisi being good when, let's face it, the defensive recruitment has not given me any encouragement that we can have that trust. Max, you mentioned George Nevitt being the option. George Nevitt hasn't been able to break up Manny Fernandez or Oscar Valen's pairing when we've conceded the most goals in the division. Like, where are you getting this from that he's a top 6 centre-back? We've got no proof of that. It's blind faith. That's what you're talking with. You're just saying, we can sign a centre-back and a right-back, and all these players are going to up their levels to top 6 League One standard when 20 games. Look, George Nevitt looks good when he plays, but we haven't seen enough of him to say that's a top 6 League One centre-back. He's barely played a game. And Fergie must have some level of concern about him. If we've got a top 6 League One centre-back sat on the bench in the dire straits we're in at the minute, what the hell has Ferguson been doing in your mind?
Oh, I mean, it's such a... I don't get it. Don't get this point of view that there's not a huge amount that has changed since last season. First of all, let's be clear. We weren't in a playoff race last season. We were in the automatics race until very late into the season. So we already we don't need as good a squad as last season to push into where we want to be, which is in and around the top 6. And when you look at the teams and I think actually the reason last night gave me confidence is because I looked at Stockport County and they are 5th. They are one of those top 5 that is supposedly unattainable for us because they're gone like the wind. But I actually don't think they were that good. They're not that good a football team. And I think that all of the players, if I'm doing a combined 11 on their day, I'm taking a lot of our players over their players. And so I don't think we are far off. I think two positions could easily fix us because while, yes, we only scored 1 goal last night, the reason why we couldn't attack them for long periods of the game is just because we couldn't get out because our defenders couldn't clear the ball. If we have an experienced centre-half who's actually getting the ball up and we're allowed to shift up, and there was a really nice period in the game, and going back to Stockport a little bit and then moving on, there was a nice period in the game where for about 10-15 minutes we had them absolutely pinned in. And it was like watching last season a little bit where we were watching a team absolutely rattled against us and we were getting them down the flanks and we were causing them all types of problems. And they looked rattled. And that was what I saw last season when we had, Ronnie and Knight stepped in and Lodz mentioned Kioso bombing on. And that reminded me of last season, that short period of play and the style of play from last season. If we have a centre-half who can do that and get the ball up and help contain teams, we will be absolutely fine. And we are only 7 points off the playoffs. That no matter how you say whether the top 5's gone, we are 7 points off the playoffs. We have as good a chance as any. You look at Rotherham, who are below us in the league, 18th. They'll still back themselves to get the playoffs. I'll tell you that right now. Steve Evans will still be thinking he can get into the playoffs with that team. If they can do it, and if all of the teams around us will back themselves to get to maybe steal that spot as well, if they can do it, why can't we do it? We have the most form in terms of getting in the playoffs of League One out of any of the teams that could potentially get in there, bar maybe Bolton, because we've done it for the last 2 seasons in a row. We can do it. We have the manager that can do it. We have a lot of the players that last season were fantastic for us. And yes, we are missing a couple of positions, but I feel like writing the season off before Christmas and saying that we're never going to get playoffs when we've got a January window in which we know we are going to invest because that has been promised to us. And I believe Darren McAntony when he says he's going to invest in January. I don't understand why we can write it off. And I think a bit of optimism as a football fan never hurt anyone.
Yeah, and I feel like there is an element of writing off here, and I don't think that, as Charlie says, we are 7 points off the playoffs, however you look at it. And to write that off is silly, considering it's 7 points. We've got 2 home games left. We've got a January window. I think that's, I'm not saying we're going to get there, but I'm saying to categorically say no, it's not going to do it. Let's go again next season. Is a silly take, in my opinion. Obviously, the next thing I wanted to come back on was George Nevitt. Yes, he hasn't got in over Manny Fernandez and Oscar Vallin. That's true. And I think if you'd asked any fan, I think they all say that it's ridiculously unfair that he hasn't had an opportunity in front of those 2 centre-halves, because whenever he's played on the pitch, I think he's been excellent. I don't think I've seen a bad performance from him this season when he's played. And he does everything that Ronnie Edwards does, just a little bit more raw. And that can be honed and that can be crafted with an experienced centre-back. But we need that centre-back to pair with him, because I don't think there's a command in that box. If we had an experienced centre-back that can command that box and do a better job at it, I think George Nevitt is going to be a spectacular centre-half. He steps on the ball, he baits the press, he drives it forward, he plays the right passes, he tries things different. Everything that we wanted from Ronnie Edwards, he has. So we just need that centre-back to guide him through and hone that. And we're going to have an excellent player. Again, to then write him off because he hasn't been able to push Manny Fernandez or Oscar Vallin out the squad is also ludicrous. He is going to play football and he is extremely good and he hasn't put a foot wrong all season. So we have to give him that opportunity. And if we recruit in that position in January, then we'll have to see what happens. But I just think he's had an excellent start to his Peterborough career, especially with the little opportunity that he's had.
Yeah, I'd just like to say, at no point did I write George Nevitt off. I think he's shown a lot of potential, and that was the point I was making. But to say he's a top 6 League One centre-back is just you've seen no proof of that, Max. So anyway, I really hope that Max and Charlie are right and that we are talking about a playoff campaign by the end of the season, and somehow we make them. And I hope that me being maybe slightly more pessimistic, some might say realistic, I don't mind. We'd love to hear your views on where Posh are going to end up this season. Tweet us, write in the YouTube comments. We would genuinely love to hear what you think and which side of the fence you sit on. We're going to move on with this debate now because we didn't talk too much about Stockport in general. I think it became more of a general chat, but I think the same issues were coming up really. So I think it was time to have that sort of general talk about where this season's going. We move on to our next game now, which is Mansfield on Boxing Day. What are we thinking here, Harry? What team lineup you going with? Are you bringing in George Nevitt, for instance?
Well, firstly, I noticed that their form has not been great. And so maybe I'll come back to Nevitt in a moment. But fundamentally, when a team's not in great form, get at them fast. So in no way am I changing up. Like Ricky stays up top for me. I'm probably keeping Mothersail on the left, despite what I've said about how he performed on Stockport against Stockport. Definitely Kean Hayes on the right. And we just try and front foot this, score as early as possible to get them a little bit rattled. Would I start Nevitt? Yeah, I probably would. I don't think there's anything wrong with a Nevitt Fernandez lineup. Also, because my perspective is similar to yours, John, that I don't want to be overly pessimistic about it, but I don't think we're making playoffs. So you may as well develop the players that we've got. And Nevitt's one of them, right? Adebisi's another one. Obviously, Hayes is it's easy with Hayes with Pokey being injured. But so yeah, I bring in that change. I drop Wallen just because the performance wasn't good enough from him last night. I'm trying to think what other changes that I'd make. I don't think Otto didn't do enough or anything really last night to suggest that he should start. I think the jury's still out for me under Haviland. I don't necessarily blame him. He's not here to be a starting centre mid. And I think he does very well when he comes on as a sub. And he's good in relief. And he can score a goal. But I'd probably give Donné a go next to Cipriano if Collins isn't better. Obviously, if Collins is better, we go with Cipriano and Collins in the middle. Other than that, I'm keeping everyone the same.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I wouldn't make any drastic changes from the weekend. I think De Havilland might be in for a shot to play because I think he was, again, one of our better players on Friday night, but I wouldn't make any drastic changes. I think that the thing we're going to get from Mansfield is just such a physical game that it's going to be, a game where we can get at them by running at them, but we're also going to have to do the tough elements of the game, game management, some of the dirty elements of the game, getting our fouls right. We're going to have to do that very well if we want to beat Mansfield, because they are going to kick us off the park, especially, you think Ricky J. Jones was getting manhandled last night. That Mansfield back three is going to be just as bad as the Stockport one, if not worse. They are going to be absolutely all over him. I noticed that they've got a number 9 playing at centre half, which I'm not a big fan of, but he is a big lad, Bowery, and he's going to be all over him. They've got, they won 1-0 over Rotherham today when we're recording, and it was a goal from a centre half. So a set piece goal that listen, we need to defend our set piece as well. We need to not give them set pieces. We need to just do the physical elements of the game right, and I think we'll be okay. I'm just excited, to be fair, to be in the GH when Christy Pym runs towards us, because I can't wait to hear the reception he's going to get. I think it's going to be one of the worst I've seen for an opposition player in a very long time. You think about, I don't know if any of you went to the Mansfield game in the Carabao Cup last season, but the reception he got there was awful, like terrible. I think that the Posh fans sung more about him that day than they did about our own team. I think it's going to be a terrible reception for him. And I just hope that he ships a load of goals and has an absolute stinker, and then maybe Fergie can lob a boot at him this time.
I would like to see Rio start. I know he came on last night, but I don't think we saw a lot of him. It weren't sort of the right game for him to show what he can do, but there's a lot of expectation on him. I know we were sort of forced to play Harley Mills, but he didn't paint himself in the best light. I'm hoping that Rio is as good as what they say he is. They say that he was the best left back in League Two and that he's so similar to Harrison Burrows, and we have lacked that from both of our wing backs this season. So it'd be nice to see if he can do that, or at least show some promise to give us some positivity in the second half of the season. The other change I can see happening is Chris Clark coming in for Randall, because by the sounds of it, last week Fergie wanted to bring him in for the Stockport game, but obviously because of his concussion issue, I don't think he was allowed to, or at least they just were a bit cautious with it. I do agree Randall was okay last night, but I don't think he was brilliant. And I think Fergie's waiting for an excuse to put Chris Clark in. I think he's found it.
Chris Clark's a really difficult one for me, because obviously I have to turn on my beloved Randall if I have to agree that Chris Clark has to start. But whenever he's come on the pitch, and this is before obviously he did his shoulder. He had that very good 10 minutes before he did his shoulder, or 20 minutes before he did his shoulder, and that's all I've seen from him. Really, I haven't seen anything spectacular. Last night he barely touched the ball when he came on. And yes, I've said that the system changes probably weren't their fault, and Chris Clark probably wasn't playing in a position that he wanted to play in. So I'm not going to hammer him for last night's performance, but I haven't seen a lot of him. And when you're on this sort of low patch and low streak, to take a gamble on Clark when we saw him at the start of the season and there wasn't a lot. I don't think whether he was fit or not, or whether he had I don't know if he had an attitude problem, but we didn't see what we expected to see when he came. And obviously he has to build his way into the squad. I've got no doubt about that. But I am just worried about throwing him in and hoping for the best. I think Randall didn't do anything wrong last night to be thrown out and Chris Clark come in. I don't think he necessarily did anything wrong. So we'll have to see. Yes, and that's not me ruling out Chris Clark, because I think Chris Clark will be a great player. I just think at this time I wouldn't really want to be trying and testing new things. But then you can say the form's bad and you need to try new ideas. So we'll see what happens against Mansfield. But it's Randall for me.
I just get the impression that Mansfield are going to sit back and be a bit worried about our attack too much. And I think in those sorts of games, Randall doesn't really play that great. You'd expect a dominant number 10 to sort of find the space and make those cute passes, but I don't think he does that very well. And I just get the feeling, I do agree with you, we haven't seen enough from Chris Clark to decide how good he's going to be, but I just get the impression he's going to be a bit more energetic and a bit faster at finding those spaces. We have to trust what Fergie says about him in training, and I don't think any of us have watched the under-21s games, but apparently he's been absolutely dominating in them. And then if Mansfield are going to sit back, the other player that doesn't really play well when that happens is Ricky J. Jones, because he obviously likes to play off the back line, and if there isn't space to run into behind, he's pretty ineffective. You'd want someone to sort of drop deep in those situations, join up with the link-up play. I don't think that's Ricky's strength. If you put him still up front, you obviously need to put a left winger in. And the times that Odo started, he's looked really poor as well. So that's a bit of a conundrum in itself. I just think Chris Clark will probably help with that issue too.
Well, yeah, to be honest, I'm not that fussed about what he does with the attack. I personally would probably keep it the same as we're used to seeing in Hayes, Randall, Mothersill and Jones. I think the bigger issue is the defence, and I think Fergie's finally had enough of Valin and Fernandez. I think he's on that train now. If you listen to his post-match yesterday, he said he could have taken Valin off after 20 minutes. And he said basically that Fernandez keeps making the same mistake, and if that doesn't change, he'll have to do something. I think Ferguson's been quite generous in his post-match presses this season, certainly more so than last season, where we were even drawing games and he was very critical. For him to come out and kind of publicly chastise those players suggests to me that he's starting to lose faith. I think the first one that has to come out is Oscar Valin. I mean, you give the boy 2 weeks off and he was awful in that first half. And there's just fundamental flaws in his game. his aerial ability is just so poor. He's 6'3", and the thing was, when we signed him, everyone was talking about we're going to be really good in the air. Do you remember when we were all saying that in pre-season? Manny and Valin, it's going to be making such a big change because we're going to be brilliant in the air. And Fernandez is very good in the air. I've been looking at aerial win percentage stats, and I know that sounds a little bit boring potentially, but Oscar Valin wins just over 1 in 3 headers. He has a 39% aerial win rate ratio. That puts him right down near the bottom of League One centre-backs. And just as a comparison, George Nevitt wins 70% of his headers this season. Manny Fernandez, 65%. Jadel Katongo, 57%. And Sam Curtis, Joel Randall, and James Dornelli all have better aerial win percentages than Oscar Valin. Now, for me, that as a 6'3" centre-back, the Swedish Viking that we were bringing in, that is worrying. And that can't continue. You can't play a defender that's winning effectively 1 in 3 of his headers. And there's just so much wrong with that. So he's got to drop out of the team. He's got to become more aggressive and physical, and he's got to do that in training. I have some sympathy for him. He's come from Sweden. It's a step up to a new league, I guess, but he's really struggling, and just take him out of the firing line now, because that's just such a clear weakness that we can have exploited by opposition teams. So I think what I would personally do is bring George Nevitt in. I think the time has come for Max's top 6 centre-back to start. He deserves a run now. He's played well when he's come on. Let's see what he can do. I'd play him alongside Manny because I think they have a skill set that potentially could complement each other. And I think Jadel Katongo, for the time being, is probably our best option at right back. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with it. I'd keep the squad relatively similar. I'm hoping Kipriano will be fit, because when we're such a much better team when we have Kipriano and Collins in. And please, Posh, shoot for the top corners, because little T-Rex arms in goal is not plucking him out the top corners. So just chip him, please. Anyway, it's time for some predictions. Harry, you first.
I am going with 1-0 Posh, a clean sheet. I think it will be really, really tight game. Ricky to score, and maybe even score a 1-on-1, which I know Pim's usually good at saving, and Ricky's usually not good at finishing. But I think it's going to be a Boxing Day miracle.
Yeah, there's no way we're keeping a clean sheet, Harry. I've given up on it happening. If it happens, it's great. I'm never going to predict us to keep a clean sheet. I'm going to say, but I do think we're going to win. I've been accused of being negative. I am not negative. We're going to beat Mansfield. We're going to win 3-2. I think we're a slightly better team than them. Yeah, I'm predicting 3 points and a happy Christmas for everyone related to Peterborough.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been the optimistic one today, but I'm actually quite pessimistic for the game. I think we're gonna draw. I think it's gonna be a very similar game to last year. I'm gonna go 3-3.
Yeah, I'm going to predict a 5-4 win, and we're going to see George Nevitt, the 4th best centre-back in the league, score an excellent goal.
I'm going to make a crazy suggestion, which is we're going to draw 0-0. I think both teams are going to be absolutely cacking themselves at conceding. I think Mansfield will sit right back. I think we'll struggle to penetrate them. Yeah, it's going to be rubbish weather, rubbish game, really, really boring. And before we go, this obviously is our last recording before Christmas. So I have done a Christmas 11 of the Posh players. So in goal, St. Nicholas Bilakapic. At right back, Sam Curtis, the season to be jolly. Centre back pairing of Jadel Katongo and Manger Fernandez. Left back, we've got Holly Mills. We've got a midfield pairing of Mahamadou Suso Ho 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 and Ryan Delapiland. We have on the right wing Kean Slays. On the left wing, Christmas Con Clark. We have Noel Randall in centre attacking midfield. And then up front, we've got Malik Mervasil.
Well, I don't really know what to say about that. Thanks a lot, Lodz. Really enjoyable content. Glad you added that in at the end. Merry Christmas, everyone. Up the Poshcast.
Merry Christmas. Up the Poshcast.
Oh.
Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Up The Poshcast. Let us know your feedback. Give us any ideas for topics you would like to discuss or any questions you'd like us to answer. Up The Poshcast.
What are you doing?
Send it to me, John. Fuck.
Oh my